Hello, everybody. My name is Daniel Portman, and I'm here with my colleague, Hannah Landis from the Azrieli College of Engineering in Jerusalem, Israel. And we are very, very happy to share our work so far, our research so far, in our use of using AI chatbots to practice spoken interaction for engineering English language learners. A little bit about our context. We have 4 levels of English at the Azrieli College of Engineering. This is in alignment with the Council for Higher Education in Israel, and students must go through all 4 levels of English in order to receive their degree. So a little bit about how we teach English at Azrieli and actually how we teach English in higher education in Israel. We are now aligned with the CEFR, particularly the action-oriented approach to teaching and learning languages, and therefore use a scenario-based teaching or learning way of pedagogy. And basically what happens throughout our courses is that students work through scenarios. They're given a role, they're given a goal, and they're given sort of the output within that sort of scenario to accomplish the goal. And they're also given resources in terms of what they will need in order to accomplish that goal. And I'm going to give you an example from our Advanced 2 course. This would be aligned probably with B2. And this course focuses on project proposals. The future engineers probably will need to be able to propose something in their work. We talk about the genre of the proposal. We start off with a problem, the existing solution before the proposal, what problems we have with the existing solutions, also citing evidence for this. And we propose a solution, we give the benefits of the solution and the future directions. So throughout the course, the students are actually practicing this genre. And here is an example of a scenario. This is a relatively easy scenario. It's called Increasing Road Safety in China with Solar-Powered Automated Transit Networks. Of course, many of us look at this, we know about increasing road safety in China. That's intuitive, but what are automated transit networks? Well, that's something the students discover as they work through this scenario. And here's the scenario. So RobSense, a Chinese transportation company, is developing a solar-powered automated transit network. They need your help to promote their development with an investor by writing a project proposal and then meeting with the investor. To do this, you will learn about the RobSense idea in an article called Design of a Solar-Powered Automated Transit Network. So here we have the role of the student. They're going to be assisting the investor in promoting the investment. We understand that the goal, of course, is the promotion of the investment, as we've said, and the 2 outputs here, it's writing a project proposal and meeting with an investor. So in terms of CEFR, we have production, writing, and then interaction, speaking. And of course, the resource that we provide is the design of a solar-powered automated transit network. Now, the students are given a text to read about ATN so they can learn about them. And then they sort of summarize here in a graphic organizer what they have learned. Now, once they have actually learned the material, they've summarized it, then they have the interview with the investor. And they're given all kinds of handy phrases that they could be using. And they're also given all kinds of possible questions that might happen when you are proposing a new venture. Now, in order to prepare for this, we have built chatbots, which I'm going to show you in a second. These chatbots are actually designed to help the students to practice for the interview. So for example, here we have the supposed investor who says, hello, nice to meet you. And we might say something like, nice to meet you too. And then we will have a discussion. Let's dive into discussing the solar-powered automated transit network. I'm very interested in learning more about it. could you please start by explaining what problem the proposal is trying to solve and what are the key issues or challenges the system is trying to address? And then the student then has a conversation with the chatbot, and this is in anticipation of a live conversation they're actually going to have with the teacher, which is part of their assessment. So we are very happy to implement these sort of chatbots, but then again, just kind of wondering what's going on during these chatbot sessions. What is happening? And you probably saw in the material that we have places where we say to paste the transcript. And it's this that we have analyzed that we want to kind of share with you so that we can start to understand what's going on. Now, the theoretical framework that we used in order to analyze what's going on is systemic functional linguistics, SFL. SFL, as some of you might know, is the study of the relationship between language and its function in social settings through 3 meta functions. So, of course, we have the language. We have the language of the chat that we can look at. And of course, we've got a specific social setting, which is the scenario that we're looking at. In terms of the 3 meta functions, these are, let's say, we can call them 3 different lenses through which we can look at interaction. In terms of our study so far, we've looked at the experiential or logical meta function, which is basically what are we communicating about and how does it develop the field or the subject matter of what's going on. There is the interpersonal, which helps us to understand through language the relationship between the different speakers, and the textual, which helps us to understand the mode of communication. Would this be an email? Would this be a chat? Would this be a spoken, live spoken interaction or not? Within the experiential and logical meta function, we're focusing on what's known as field shift. Field shift is when discourse moves away from the expected matter or context, and of course can dilute the focus of communication, leading to less effective engagement with the intended subject matter. So as you can see where we're sort of going, when Hannah and I looked at the data, we started noticing some field shifts, and we said we would kind of investigate what we've seen. And a little bit into how we did analyze the data is, as we said, we told chat, actually, we used chat to analyze field shift based on the SFL definition. We then fed in the base text, the text that you saw, and the scenario that the students were asked to draw in on their conversations. We then got the transcripts of the chatbot interactions, and we asked GPT to analyze the field shifts turn by turn so we can understand how things were unfolding within the conversations. And then we manually analyzed each one to validate or invalidate chat's analysis. And we found it was about 80% accurate. We got a bonus because chat also gave us its opinion on the impact of each field shift. So it's quite interesting, the insight that we got using chat to actually analyze the field shifts using SFL. And we identified about 10 types of field shifts. And Hannah is now going to continue with what we have found, illustrating it with 4 out of these 10.
Thank you, Daniel. So I'm going to go over 4 out of the 10 field shifts. And we chose these 4 because they seemed, first of all, to be the most common, and also ones that we would easily be able to explain to the students where they went wrong and how they can make their answers better. So we used a metaphor of from the field of cinema to better understand exactly what we're seeing with the students. So the first field shift we found was zooming out. We expect the students to provide specific data and concrete evidence. And instead, what we see is that they're providing general details, which leads to their argument being vague and unconvincing. And here's an example from one of our transcripts. The chatbot, PO, asks, what are some of the current solutions that are used to power ATNs and provide transportation in remote places? What limitations do those existing approaches have that your solar-powered ATN proposal seeks to address? So the chatbot is asking about very specific issues, but the student answers, right now, people are using mostly private transportation, which causes a lot of accidents and produce a lot of emissions. So we have a specific question, but we're getting a very vague answer. Not that anything is wrong, but the argument now becomes like more diffuse. Our next field shift is what we call the partial shot. We expect specific details and data, and what we get is some details, data, and evidence. So the student has addressed only part of the issue. And the impact that this has is that we're focusing only on one part of the field of discussion instead of relating to all of the questions. So our perspective is a little skewed. And an example here would be the chatbot asks, what evidence shows that this is a real problem? What are the current solutions being used that aren't fully addressing the traffic problem? And the student relates in great detail just to the first question. The first and most important problem is safety. Pedestrians and cyclists are getting hit. Moreover, there are a lot of car crashes every year due to the rising population and the growing amount of cars. So we do have more detail here, more than what we saw, for example, in the first field shift, but it's focusing only on one issue. And so our overall understanding of the entire case scenario is a little off base right now. Our next field shift is what we call shutter happy, which is when we take a ton of pictures at once. We expect specific details and data, but what we get is everything they know. The student simply just starts answering with all the material that they have. And what this leads to is it diverts attention from the focus of discussion. We're not really answering the question. It's not that we're saying anything that's necessarily wrong, but the student is simply sharing all the information that they have. And the example that we have here is the chatbot asks, what evidence do you have that specifically shows traffic has doubled in the last 5 years in the city where you plan to implement this system? And the student starts answering, according to the Beijing traffic management, last year they had 5,891 car accidents, resulting in 126 deaths. Goes on, there are some different solutions to improve this problem. Most of them work on traffic, most of them work on electric, that cost a lot of money. All of them are working main cities and not in off-road places. So at a certain point, the student is just not really addressing the question at all. They're simply discussing everything they know, which can lead to a very confusing sensation when you're trying to conduct an interview. And our last field shift is what we call cross-cutting. Cross-cutting is the experience you have when you're watching a film and the camera moves very quickly between characters' perspective. So we expect the student to be leading the conversation. The student is the expert. The student is supposed to tell and give over the important information. But what we see is that the student is simply following the interlocutor, the questions that are being asked. Now, most of the time in interviews, when an expert is speaking and there's an audience member, even if the audience or the interviewer asks something that's not entirely on topic, the expert should relate to that, but then lead the conversation back to the subject. And what happens when the student simply follows any question that's being asked is that they're no longer playing the role of the expert. So they're missing a part of the interaction that we want them to have. And the impact that this has is that the student is basically giving up their authority. They're not really playing the role that we want them to play in this scenario. Daniel, can you take us back to some of our conclusions?
Yes. So what have we learned as teachers from this research, this very kind of deep research, is that field shifting seems to be a challenge. And students tend to do it, evidently, from our observations at least. So if we provide them with targeted practice to avoid this kind of field shifting, then what we can do is enhance the practice with the chatbots. So for example, as simple as giving adjacent pairs, like of the kinds of examples that we've seen, and said, what seems to be wrong with this? We don't necessarily have to use the names that we've used, but certainly to say there seems to be a problem. What kind of problem is it, and how would you correct it? And even prepare students to work with chatbots a little bit more effectively. As an action-oriented activity, students should be expected to understand the outcome of the conversation. Here we have some, I would say, just practicing speaking or answering questions, which I think was which resulted in the field shifts. But maybe we need to speak to the students more about the rhetorical purpose. Why are we having this conversation? And then maybe understanding a little bit more of why are we having this conversation, they then can play the role of expert and to stay on target, because they know then that at the end of the day, they need to convince the investor to invest in the ATN, the solar powered ATN. Another conclusion is that chatbots can provide endless opportunities for personalized interaction and mediation practice. Of course, as if you just hit reset, you can have another conversation and another conversation, and you can improve. And also, in terms of the CEFR activity of mediation, what we're really practicing here is the understanding that you can't just take a text and paste it onto a chatbot conversation. You have to mediate the information in the text so that it is appropriate when promoting a new idea. And also, we think it can provide a training wheel feedback to students. What do I mean by that? That perhaps programmed into this chatbot could be, let's say, a secondary chatbot, which says, that was a good answer, but let's look at the field shift. Was that exactly what you wanted to say? Perhaps you want to zoom in a bit more on details. Perhaps you want to give me more information, etc. So that could be a very interesting development. And of course, from our experience using ChatGPT or other such tools, this can be excellent for action research for teachers, because teachers can really analyze a lot more data than we would have had to have done manually. It does take time to get chat to do what you want it to do, but once you do have it doing what you want and you get the data that you need, it's excellent for action research. And so where are we going from here? We want to use some of the mismatches. I think we talked about the 20% that did not seem to work out with chat, to train chat to help us analyze our data even better, more according to our needs, to what we would need. And we also want to test out our categories with more data. So though we've established our 10 categories, we want to see perhaps if it's those 10 categories which seem relevant throughout most of our data, or whether we need to perhaps expand or even reduce once we've seen similarities. And then, of course, we do want to analyze the interpersonal and textual metafunctions. Again, the linguistic evidence of what kind of relationship do we see happening? Do we see and being enacted between the investor and the presenter? And of course, the textual metafunctions as well. We want to see to what degree the students are really treating this as a chat conversation or maybe a spoken conversation, and not as sort of just a question answer session. So here's our email. This is an async presentation, so we can't take any questions, but we would be more than happy if you would like to reach out to our emails and to discuss. We could Zoom, etc. And if anybody else is out there working with chatbots in English language learning, we would love to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.